Welcome. This is Signal. For your listening pleasure, I present to you Average Joe, Episode 2, Season 5.
Average Joe travels the California Inscape. Season 5, Children of the Pumpkins. Episode 2, Big Trouble in Little Fairyland. Story by Penguin Pete. Written by Clyde Wrenn. Estragon and Vladimir waiting for Dodge Zelko. And featuring the vocal stylings of This Is Signal. Spanky McDongle sat staring out the window as Stan Kenton and June Christie came through the static of the burnished radio in the corner of the office. She sang of shoe-fly pie and apple pan dowdy as Stan and the boys held down the groove. Spanky had taken his job working for the Average Joe Detective Agency recently after parting ways with the Waterspew Overview Hotel and Secret Casino. This job paid about the same as the casino gig, but it was a heck of a lot easier. Human expectations baffled Spanky. Being a leprechaun, it was a wonder he could earn $1 in the human world at all. Here, all he had to do was answer the phone occasionally, open mail, and maybe feed the cat. This morning, he was the first one in the office. It wasn't long, though, before he watched his boss park on the street below and disappear into the front of the building. He'd be in the office momentarily. That's me. I'm he. The boss. Average Joe. Good morning, Spanky. Here early, I see. Nice to see a man who takes his job seriously. Spanky didn't see the need to talk about how the only ride he could find today was an early one.
I appreciate the opportunity, Joe. You already had somebody stop in. Younger fella. Wanted to talk to you, said it was urgent. Didn't leave his name, though. Just said he'd come back later.
Well, thanks. You'll see all kinds around this place. And they all have problems. You'll see. No coffee yet, huh? Why don't you fire up a pot for us, pal?
I gotta be honest with you, Mr. Joe. I don't know how to make coffee. I don't drink it. I don't need to move any faster, you know?
This guy worked in a casino but doesn't know how to make coffee. Well, I suppose the list of cocktails he must know how to make is as tall as he is short. Spanky also didn't seem to move that fast. Well, it doesn't take a detective to solve the mystery of why he's no longer at the Waterspew. When Anne entered the office, she didn't make a sound, but we knew she was there. Somehow, you could always tell when Anne's around. The blower started ringing before she even sat down. I looked to Spanky to see if he would make a move for the phone, but he did not. After 4 rings, Anne turned and beat me to the receiver. Her conversation with whoever was on the other end was mostly her listening and them jabbering. When she hung up, her audience of 1.5 was all ears.
That was the coroner. He said he couldn't identify the toxin that killed our nutmeg thief, and the delivery mechanism was no dart.
Knuckles suddenly rapped on the frosted glass of the office door, and a visitor pushed it open.
Knock, knock. What's the word, Average Joe?
It was Roarin' Roy Stabbers, a bounty hunter I'd crossed paths with a number of times, as well as an old army buddy. I can't say it was necessarily good to see him. He usually brought complicated news. But I guess I did anyway. Roy, it's good to see you. Who are you chasing today?
Name's Spunker. Sammy Spunker. Seen him?
Roaring Roy handed me an 8x10 poster with a picture of a young man's face on it. Somebody was offering $10,000 to bring him in. I had not seen Spunker, but this poster was at the post office a day or two ago. That's why it's called a post office. I didn't remember the man's face, but the 10,000 big one sure rang a bell. That's a lot of clams, old buddy. What do you do?
I don't know this time, but if you hear anything, you'll let me know, won't you? Pretty big pie there. Plenty of pieces to go around.
If we did hear anything, there'd be perhaps no reason to share it. If we brought in Spunker ourselves, we'd be in pie for days. But then again, Roaring Roy had happily helped us before. Oh well, that's a conundrous moral bridge I'll cross when and if I get to it. Of course. Let's catch up over something strong sometime.
Hey, let's do that. Gotta run. Abyssinia.
Abyssinia. The word teleported me back to when I was a mere boy. Then I was known to the world as Young Joe, and my great-uncle Yosef had taken me on an unlikely trip to those dusty, labyrinthine corridors and passways of Addis Ababa. The Great War had only just begun, and I had accompanied my globe-trotting relative in pursuit of an ancient tome. While he browsed archives, antique shops, and bazaars, I wandered aimlessly until I happened upon a forthright merchant. Before he let me continue on my way, he obliged me to purchase a counterfeit Norfolk lever pocket watch. During my interlude, Roaring Roy had left. Collecting myself, I leaned into Spanky. Told you, Spanky. All kinds. Once I got some coffee made, Anne and I settled into the clerical duties of the day while Spanky entertained himself with the radio and the paper he was doodling on. It looked like he might have been drawing birds having a fight. The sound of another knuckle against the frosted glass brought our attention to the door as it opened again. A jittery young man entered and closed the door behind himself. He approached me and extended his hand. Mr. Joe? My name is Sammy Spunker and I need your help. This was all coming together in a very tidy fashion. Or maybe it was coming apart. I picked up the wanted poster from my desk and held it up for Spunker to see. This you? Yeah, but I didn't do anything. That's a story made up by my captors. They used me as a slave, but I escaped. I glanced at the poster again before putting it back on the desk. It was still unclear what Spunker was doing here, and a bit unbelievable he'd show up right on the heels of the man who was looking for him. An escaped slave, huh? How is it you think this agency can help you? He fidgeted with his pants like he needed a belt. I have this problem. It's like a curse they put on me when I was little. I'm invincible. Anne decided to join the dialogue when she heard the word curse.
Invincible? That doesn't sound like too bad of a curse.
Spunker shook his head. But it is, ma'am. Whenever something happens that might damage my body, I just wink out. I go away and get stuck somewhere else until the danger is past. I go to a place that leaves me sick and dazed when I come back to where I was. I can't take much more of it. I was still unsure about this character and thought of something to test his claim. So, Mr. Spunker, do you mean to tell us that if I were to maybe do this? I served him up a nice ham and knuckle hoagie right between the headlights. Sure enough, Spunker vanished from the office. Anne squinted as she pondered his disappearance and subsequent reappearance. She addressed him as he took a knee and tried to recover from his trip to Cuckoo Town.
Mr. Spunker, I am interested in your condition. But why have you come to us in particular?
He stood and began to elaborate. Well, ma'am, I knew that your agency was present at the Food for You warehouse last night, and I feel just awful. The sound of rifle fire and glass breaking put an end to our talk. The bullet had come through the window and put a hole in the wall behind Spunker. I shoved the unhappy Sammy toward the closet and shouted to Anne and Spanky, "Get on the floor! Spunker, get in that closet." When I crawled over to the window and peeked out, I saw the shooter come out of the front door of the apartment building across the street. Carrying a high-caliber rifle, he joined 3 other men on the corner. They were all business, and wore their trench coats almost as well as I wore mine. Anne took a hard right into another topic entirely, as she was wont to do.
Joe, I'm having a thought. That dart that wasn't a dart. It could have been a tiny arrow or a crossbow bolt, right?
Sure, I guess. Can you maybe zap the bad guys and then we can discuss it?
I have to look something up. Spanky, on the third shelf, up on the bookcase behind you. The big green book with the gold stitching on the spine. Slide it over to me.
Spanky's mouth opened and his eyes widened.
You want me to stand up?
I hate being the face of bravery. I crawled over, stood up, and grabbed the book. After sliding it across the floor to Anne, I shook my head at the leprechaun. For Pete's sake, man, have a little nerve, will ya?
Whose nerve you calling little, bucko?
Anne leafed through the pages of the book as if she were lounging on the floor at a slumber party.
Oh no, Joe. It's the Fae. They're behind all of this. The Fae do use nutmeg for a drug, and they take human slaves. God knows what they're up to now.
A muffled reply came from the closet. Yes, that's exactly right. Spanky crawled as fast as his little arms and legs could take him toward the door and reached up to twist the knob. When he got it open, he gave us a predictable, if not courageous, farewell.
Faye? Like fairies and all that. That's it. I'm done. Call me unemployed again.
With that, Spanky McDongle stood up and poofed away. The muffled voice came again from the closet. They made me do things for them. I was the one breaking into the warehouse until last night. When I escaped, they made this other poor kid do it too. And now he's dead.
It's not your fault, Sammy. Joe, we have to take this to Lucrecia. I don't know what else to do. Sammy, put on one of those trench coats in there, and a fedora. We have to make a break for it. If you and Joe look the same, they won't know who to shoot.
I had to hand it to her. Anne was a smart... Hey, wait a second. He's invincible.
Still, Joe, we need to keep them guessing. The car is already warded. It's a hard target. Just make it that far.
And so we did. I tore out of the parking spot, and the bounty hunters loaded into the Pontiac Streamliner they had been leaning against. In seconds, they were behind us on the way to Lucrecia's mansion. Two of the men had the upper half of their bodies outside the Streamliner, firing at us with pistols. The bullets veered harmlessly to the right and left of us, Anne's magic pushing the slugs off target. She grinned as I drove and Spunker laid in the back seat. I think she may have been enjoying herself.
See, Joe. Easy peasy.
Okay, partner. I'm not worried about the schmucks behind us. What's that behind them? In the rearview mirror, I caught sight of what looked like a fast-moving flock of birds that was flying low, right behind the bounty hunters. Anne turned and examined the sinister cloud.
Oh my.
Oh my what, Anne? What is that? She swallowed and then answered me.
Death fairies. A lot of them. Step on it, Joe. We need to get to Lucrecia's now.
And so I did. We sped through the gate of Lucrecia's vast estate, the gargoyles on either side a blur as we passed them. The death fairies turned tail, and the bounty hunters were able to brake just in time to stop before crashing into the heavy iron gate that closed behind us. Our foes were not welcome here, and to tell you the truth, it didn't feel like home to me either. The Packard drifted halfway round the rotary drive in front of the mansion before I stopped it and killed the engine. We climbed the limestone stairs and entered the foyer through the open doors. As if she felt the urgency of our predicament, Lucrecia greeted us herself. There were no staff present.
This way, child. Hello, Joseph. And you are Fae-touched. Be still.
Lucrecia scanned Spunker from head to toe as she circled him. Satisfied, she turned and walked deeper into the mansion.
Come along, all of you.
This was Lucrecia's permanent residence, and aside from her staff, she lived alone. Still, as was her way, she wore a stately gown that might have been suitable for a royal dinner party. She glided across the marble floor of the corridor until she turned left into a cold, dark study where she gestured for all of us to sit down. Lucrecia took a look at each of us, her stern gaze penetrating us all to the very bottom.
So tell me, how have you crossed the Fae?
We related our tale to her, all the exceptional events of the morning. She nodded and stood up. With her back to us, she faced the dormant fireplace and gave an optimistic appraisal.
While they are as wild as their Fae kingdom, the unpredictable Fae can be reasoned with by a tactful, sensitive negotiator. There may yet be a diplomatic solution.
I think we all felt a little better hearing those words from a wise and powerful witch like Lucrecia. Heaven knows I did. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Samantha creep into the room and then felt her brush against my leg. I was fine. Little cat hair on my trousers was nothing to be concerned about right now. She carried something in her mouth, the fruit of her most recent hunt. I smiled and made note of it to the group. At least one of us is having lunch. Lucrecia squatted and beckoned the cat as she spoke.
What on earth does she have?
She picked it up after Samantha dropped it at her feet. We all moved closer to see what the cat had found. The dove-sized being had wings, arms, legs, a twisted humanoid face, and a tiny quiver of tiny crossbow bolts on its tiny back. Lucrecia flung the death fairy into the fireplace. She sat down, and we watched her mood change very quickly. Locked in a 1,000-yard stare, Lucrecia revised her assessment.
Ugh, so much for the diplomatic solution.
This Is Signal can be found on Twitter, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, Google Podcasts, Radio Public, and YouTube. Links for all of this can be found at thisisissignal.ca. Thank you so much for listening to me today.